So thank you very much for joining in this training on key considerations for software as a service, electronic quality management system validation. My name is Angel Buendia. I'm the knowledge manager at Scilife, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. Okay, but first of all, let's start by ensuring that everyone is on the same page. Note that this is a 1-hour training session, and the training is structured into sections. The main section is the training itself, and it will take about 45 minutes. And after that, we will have a 10 minutes Q&A session. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them as we go through this training. You can use the Q&A button. You can find it in the Zoom bar next to the chat button, okay? So during this training, I will select those questions, and at the end, during the session, we will make sure to answer as many questions as possible. But if not, note that we are going to prepare a recap page, and this recap page will address all the questions, all the answers, additional information, and some highlights about today's training. And yeah, and last but not least, we will also send you the recording. Okay, right, so now let me introduce today's topic, key considerations for software as a service, electronic quality management systems validation. And why this topic today? You know that in the life sciences industry, you know that compliance and also innovation are not only ideals, but they are necessities for ensuring the safety and the efficacy of drugs and also medical services, so right, and medical devices, okay? And an electronic quality management system software as a service is, let's say, it's a cost-effective, it's flexible, it's scalable, it's easy to use, and also compliant cloud-based quality management system. So today we will shed light on why electronic quality management system software as a service system needs to be validated with some tips and with some best practices as well. And one of the advantages of using a SaaS vendor is that your company, in case you are the sponsor, you can leverage most of the documentation and the processes that are provided by the vendor. And this reduces the need to create anything from scratch, and this accelerates the implementation of your electronic quality management system. But this is not enough. Validation requires objective evidence that the system works as intended. So only you, if you are the sponsor, can determine exactly what is your intended use. So today we will look forward to sharing more insights and best practices during the webinar. Okay. So having said that, I would like to introduce our guest expert. She is Angela Bazigos. She's the CEO of Leader Compliance Consulting. Hello, Angela. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Angel. Angel. Thank you for the segue. And hello, everybody, depending on your time zone. As Angel said, my name is Angela Bazigos. So I am the CEO at Leader Compliance Consulting. A little bit of a background. All this validation stuff you have to do, well, I'm one of the people that wrote it. So being in the industry for such a long time, I have 40 plus years experience in the industry, and I am one of the culprits for 21 CFR 11 and computer systems validation. I also have co-authored 2 books with FDA and DIA or SQA. One of them is the computerized systems in clinical research, and also a data integrity book, which is actually due out at the latter part of this year. And the other part is I'm a member of the think tank that helps FDA regulate new technologies. And last but not least, I am leading the credentialing program for computer systems validation, both at industry and at FDA. And we're using my templates because I have just been doing this for such a long time. So that's sort of the pertinent information about me. And you'll see the status of where we are with validation of any system, especially SaaS systems and especially EQMS. So the contents, we're going to go through a very brief introduction. And I don't know different people's level of expertise. So I'm going to go through the validation principles to comply with GAMP 5 requirements, very high level, obviously, and the deliverables expected for SaaS validation. We'll talk about who's responsible for what, vendor versus sponsor. I will talk about managing vendor subcontractors, and then which are actually all things that you want to look at any SaaS system, but there are special considerations for EQMS SaaS systems versus other SaaS systems, and we'll go over those. Conclusion, as Angel said, a Q&A session. So just briefly, as Angel said, an essential part of life sciences is to ensure patient safety and product quality. And by product quality, we mean efficacy. And I want to just make a note here. I'll be saying FDA, but that means any regulatory agency that is a member of either ICH or PICS. And you would know about this agency. Even if they're not members, they'll still be using FDA as a reference, if nothing else. And the reason this is important, the ensuring patient safety and product quality is not just our directive. It is actually the directive of the agencies. So that's all they care about. And when they're looking at your company and they're doing an inspection, they want to make sure that we're doing this so that they can do their job and ensuring patient safety and product quality. So in order to do that, we need to have a quality plan. So we have the processes for quality, and you need to, that's good to have a plan, but you actually need to execute on the plan. And the way to do that is with a quality management system. And of course, as you're probably aware, a quality management system documents policies, protocols, controls, and anything that's pertinent to the creation and delivery of high quality products and services to customers. Here, our customers are our patients. Some very simple concepts. What's a quality plan anyway? So this is the document that is a prescription for how your company will achieve patient safety and product quality. A quality management system is the system that is used to implement your quality plan. An EQMS is electronic, opposed to paper, and you can have a hybrid. Some companies have a hybrid. And then a SaaS EQMS, it's nothing mysterious or something that you would not understand. It's just an EQMS installed in someone else's data center. That's all it is. And this is important to remember because we still have the same components as an on-site EQMS. We just need to make sure all the components are taken care of wherever they are. Okay, So again, high-level validation principles to comply with GAMP 5, and this is so that we're all on the same page. As Angel said, software validation is the confirmation by examination and provision of objective evidence that the software specifications conform to user needs and intended users, and that the particular requirements implemented through software can be consistently fulfilled. Okay, and please note all these important concepts in this statement. The software conforms to user needs, conforms to intended users. You have requirements that are implemented through the software, and those requirements have to be consistently fulfilled by the software, okay? And this principle applies, and I am continuing from the guidance, to the validation of any software or software used to design, develop, or manufacture whatever your company's product is. And of course, if it's not documented, it did not occur. So we need to document everything to meet FDA standards. A brief primer on how all these moving parts go together in terms of regulations and plans and then SOPs. So the regulation is 21 CFR 11. And again, could be Annex 11. I'm using FDA as an example, but whatever is for your regulatory authorities. Now, the regulation is then explained further by FDA in the form, of guidance documents. And one of the guidance documents for 21 CFR 11 is General Principles of Software Validation. And this applies specifically to 21 CFR 1110A, which, of course, as you know, is the way that you implement the entirety of 21 CFR 11. Now, typically, and for anything else, you would go from the guidance straight into an SOP. However, in validation, we are very lucky, if you want to call it that, and instead of trying to get the guidance into an SOP, we can go through GAMP 5. So GAMP 5 is the Bible, okay, or the Quran, or the whatever religious standard you have. So we go to GAMP 5, and then from GAMP 5, we come up with our computer systems validation SOP. Now, SOPs are funny things because they're very important, but anything else between the regulation and your SOP is not mandatory, okay? The SOP is the law in your company. So the SOP is a representation of the regulation. And now some people say, well, we don't have to do the way the agency describes things because, for example, guidance documents say things, this is our current thinking. Yeah, no, you do have to do them, okay? It's just, you can go through GAMP 5 or not. It's just a lot harder if you don't, but you come up with your computer systems validation SOP, and then your validation plan and all your other deliverables up to the validation report, they are based on your computer systems validation SOP. So hopefully you have that. And of course, this is the guidance if you ever want to reference it. So GAMP 5 very kindly provides us with a methodology. Now I have to tell you, this is called the GAMP 5. This is called the validation V. I have to tell you, I am so jealous. When we were writing 21 CFR 11 and general principles of software validation, we were using the waterfall model, and I know some of you fell off your chairs when I said that, but I can't remember who it was, but somebody goes, "Oh, it's validation. Instead of having it waterfall, why don't we make it into a V?" And we all thought, this is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant. So this is how the validation V was created. The other thing I want you to note is that the V has IQ, OQ, PQ. These are not software engineering words, but it was so hard to get FDA to understand validation, and they use these terms from process validation. And after multiple meetings, we said, you know what, fine, we'll just use IQ, OQ, PQ. But truly, what we have is things like unit testing, installation testing, system testing, functional security, integration testing, or user acceptance testing, with, of course, installation testing being IQ, system testing, and everything else. And I actually put unit testing in this as OQ, and then user acceptance testing is the PQ. I'm not addressing risk specifically, but of course we have to have risk management throughout this, the entire life cycle, again, with GAMP 5. That's something that needs to be taken into account for validation, both for better and for worse, usually for better. Now, I said the R word. Many times when you buy a system, a SaaS system, people say, oh, yes, we have validation. We're starting with IQ. Yeah, you need to take a couple of steps back. So this is sort of an elephant in the room, as it were. And the other thing is, the other elephant in the room is pre-validation. People speak about the vendor has pre-validation. I want to address both of those. The first one is that people think, well, we only need IQ or QPQ because the vendor gives us requirements. That is like you go into a restaurant and your waiter orders food for you and then tells you that you liked it. Your vendor cannot give you requirements. Only you can come up with requirements. And this also means that the vendor cannot pre-validate the system because the vendor is saying that the system is that you like the food. Just for those of you who are confused, annoyed, puzzled with this, I am publishing a paper for the Society of Quality Assurance to explain pre-validation, because many times people now are using this, or vendors are using this a lot, and it's not accurate. So, but if you were to go to a restaurant and your waiter ordered for you and told you you liked it, would you be happy? Would the food make sure that it works per your intended use? You're the only one that knows what you wanted to eat, okay? So validation can only be done by you. So we have to have requirements. However, people say to me, but we don't have any requirements. Okay, all right, no problem. Question is, how do you find a needle in a haystack? First, you burn the haystack. So if you don't have requirements, I would turn all the features off. You know, you have nothing, no file save, no nothing. And then you're good. You know, you have a system that does not meet any requirements. Good job. However, when I do that, and it has happened to me, I have to tell you, if I turn everything off, people say, oh, wait a minute, I need this, or I need that, or I need that. Those are your requirements, okay? And very, very importantly, if you do not need a feature, you have to turn it off to make sure it is not used accidentally. So this is one of the reasons that the requirements are important, because you only get the features that you need. If you have features that you're not using, they can be accidentally used, and this will break the validation of the entire system. Then I have people say, well, we don't want requirements because we use agile methodology, or we use I can't remember all the methodologies that are out there right now. For the record, I am one of the first people to write something called rapid application development. And this was back at the same time. I used that to write the general principles of software validation. I generated this methodology. We used it at Roche. We used it at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And this was an early precursor to Agile. And the point I'm trying to make here is you can use whatever you like. Rapid application development was like Agile. At the end of the day, it does not matter how you generate your requirements, so long as they're captured. And the reason for this is you have to have the same deliverables as GAMP 5 has. And the reason for that is because a regulatory agency does not have the time or the inclination to care about how you capture requirements. Let's just say, this is what we have in GAMP 5, this is what we expect, so just give us those documents. If you do not give those documents, you're going to get a citation. All right, then people say, well, you know what, this is a COTS, we do not need requirements, so this is a SaaS. Just for the record, one of the most amazing books that you want to buy is Facts and Fallacies of Software Engineering. You can get it on Amazon. And it says the most common causes of runaway projects is unstable requirements and poor estimation. And of course, poor estimation is a direct result of estimating a project before you have requirements. And may I remind you, if you were to go into a restaurant, the waiter orders for you and then tells you you like the food. You need requirements. It doesn't matter what the system is. People say it's a COTS. Yeah, that's okay. You still need requirements because when you have requirements for the COTS versus a custom system, which are GAMP 4 and GAMP 5, it's just a matter of degree, not of kind. What I mean by that is if you have a COTS, you'll just say, I need an e-signature field. If you have a custom system, you have to say, I need an e-signature field that's 90 characters wide and does not accept numbers or null values. You still need an e-signature field, but you have to have it's just a difference in degree, not in kind. The other fallacy is people think that COTS cover 100% of desired functionality. No, and this includes SaaS systems, they are COTS. You'll be likely to get, I don't know, 90 perhaps, 90%. You usually have to have additional work, whether it's code or other things to add to cover other functionality. The most common example I can think of is integration with other systems. Sometimes, and I'm going to use, I'm not going to use an EQMS example here, I'm going to use a clinical example where you have a system that captures the clinical trial information, and then you have a system that captures the safety information, and both of them are capturing adverse events. Of course, the adverse events have to be the same between the safety information and the clinical trial information, and you have to write modules to make that reconciliation. So there's more that you have to do, and those would go into your requirements. The requirements is what the user wants. There is a fallacy that design is how it's done, and that's not true. Requirements is what the user wants. Design or configuration is what the user gets, because there's a lot of things in your requirements that cannot be implemented electronically. You will need SOPs for this, and the SOPs are entirely user functions. So cards will have the bulk of what you need, but you will need additional things, be it electronic or manual. And of course, this is the most important thing. As you probably already know, if you have a system and you have an error at requirements, and the error takes $1 to fix, at requirements phase, it will take $1 to fix. By the time you get to the operation phase, it'll be anything between up to $1,000 to fix a $1 error. So it's good to do the requirements, test everything at requirements, and then implement the rest of the system. Okay, and then there's this thing that a system is pre-validated. We talked about this. So vendors test, sponsors validate, okay? In fact, FDA has a rule against calling systems pre-validated, and as I said, I am working with them to publish a paper against about pre-validation being used incorrectly. And the best you can say is that the vendor can make the system Part 11 capable, but really you're responsible. Okay, so here are the deliverables expected from the SaaS validation. But before we do that, I want to have some terms or some definitions. When we use the term computerized systems in a regulated word, we actually mean the processes and the equipment and the software and the hardware, everything. So it's not just the system, it's all the things that are needed to get that system working. Vendor test, sponsor validates, then, and by the way, I have a few slides that I'm just going to let you read through yourselves. But for example, if a system were a bicycle, what the vendor does not give you the bicycle. They give you, the vendor creates a bicycle, they test the bicycle and say a wheel is an Oracle 12 and the handlebar is Windows 10 on that bicycle. The vendor then gives you the gearbox, okay? You have to build your own bicycle. And that means you have to test the gearbox inside your environment. So it could be that the vendor gives you whatever interface you have for the system, and then you have to tweak it to make it work in your environment. The other thing to pay attention to, the systems can have something like an EQMS can have 10 to the 6 functions, and you might only need 400. So you really do not want to be testing 10 to the 6 functions. Now, we talked about the waiter and all that good stuff. But what sometimes vendors will do is they will provide their own implementation team, their own validation team. That is fantastic. However, you are responsible. It's your system, your requirements. So let's look at the SaaS system deliverables. There's actually two sets of deliverables. The first one is the actual technology set, which is you have your COD system, which is the SaaS, you have your possibly custom systems, and then you have everything that meets 21 CFR 11, Annex 11 deliverables. However, you also have the processes, and your processes are the ones that are the quality plan deliverables. One of the things I want to put in here is make sure that whatever you write here, whatever sort of requirements you write here are system agnostic. Do not put in there, this does not work for this system. We do not care. This is your requirement, and then we will figure out a way to implement what the system does not meet. The user processes are part of creating this this system, include technical requirements, regulatory, and include anything else that is a requirement, and then we'll figure out how to get it done. Back to what the GAMP 5 deliverables would be, like I said, FDA did not quite understand the IEEE software engineering, so we stayed with IQ, OQ, PQ, but we also need a validation plan and validation report. Of course, you're probably fully aware that in our industry, we work in bookends. So you always start with a plan, then you do a whole bunch of execution, and then you have a report against the plan. This is one of the very important documents that the agency would look at to begin with. Now, in the next few slides, or in the next 3 or 4 slides, I have the categories of requirements that you have to have, okay? I'm not going to read through the slides. However, I just want to create a picture of a system for you. And a system essentially has 3 buckets, okay? The first bucket is the plan. The second bucket is the execution. And the third bucket is the interpretation of results, okay? So when you're doing your requirements, you would have things like, first of all, configuration requirements, for example, security. What functions of the system you're going to be using, that sort of thing. All those go into configuration. Then you have the data design, which is the plan. You have the data collection and data collection tracking, which is the actual. This is where you do things, and also no data is ever clean. You need to have data cleanup requirements. Then you prepare for analysis, which is preparation, analysis, and then how do you handle the results that come out of the analysis? Those all need to be part of the requirements. And then, of course, you have the document management, workflow, security, audit trails, interface, import-export performance, reproducibility, technical, backup and recovery, archive and de-archive. All those are requirement categories that you need to have. This is on the 21 CFR 11 part. For the quality plan processes, document control, of course, is the first one. And then these are all good modules to have: training, CAPA, issue management, audit management, equipment management, supplier management, product management, change management, design, control, and collection. This is specific to medical devices, risk management, and of course, reporting. Because remember, your quality plan is a plan. Your quality management system, or EQMS, is how you implement this plan, how you execute on the plan, and then you have to report, because in our industry, we work in bookends. We have a plan and you have a report. And the reports tend to be periodic to senior management, say quarterly, to make sure that things are on track with the most important things, the most important requirements of keeping patients safe and having a quality product. So who's responsible for what in this? So here's what's different about the SaaS system. Instead of just you doing the validation, you're now working with the vendor to do the validation. You're sharing the way that you're doing your validation, which means you still have to do everything. It's just not all of that under, you're not doing it directly. You supervise the vendor to do it correctly. I have a RACI chart here of how the requirements, how the deliverables are apportioned to responsibility. And I have sponsor and I have vendor. I'll let you guys look at it. However, look at this third column here, okay? Vendors actually subcontract these things, subcontract some things. For example, cloud, okay? So those are now people who are also, you're also responsible for them. You're not just responsible for the vendor, you're responsible for the vendor cloud supplier. So, what's a person to do? How do you go about validating a SaaS EQMS? The first good thing to do is to have your own computer system validation SOP. Then for each CSV deliverable, you want a template. And as I said, I am putting templates together for the industry and FDA. I can always help you with that. Then you look at your computer systems validation. This is your baseline and your templates. And you find out how the EQMS implements your quality plan. So you map your existing SOPs or future SOPs to the EQMS components. Then you look at each component and you say, all right, the vendor gives this for this component. So you move those into your templates, okay? Do not use the vendor templates. It has to be your templates. Now, of course, sometimes things do not match. You have to update. However, if you're deviating from your computer systems validation SOP, you need to document the deviation that you are deviating from your templates to be able to complete the validation. Remember, document, document, document. And then you map EQMS functions to any other requirements. Please, please, please turn off any EQMS functions that you're not using. Then select whatever tools or deliverables the vendor has. If you have your own test cases, and I recommend that people, by the way, I'm also working on lean documentation for the industry, and my templates will have lean documentation, will be on lean documentation. But if you already have test cases, you should have test cases for about half of the requirements for things like login, logout, that sort of thing. Use yours unless you want to update them with something from the vendor. Use as many of the vendor deliverables as match your requirements, but all the deliverables need to be included. I joke that validation is like being pregnant. You cannot be a little bit pregnant. You have to have everything in order to get proper validation. SaaS is sharing, okay? So you do some validation, they do some validation, you take their deliverables, but remember, you are responsible. It's not the vendor, because think about it, if you were at your company and you hired a consultant or a contractor, and in your goals and objectives for the year, so you can get a raise, says you have to complete X. And you hire the contractor to do X, but the contractor does not do a good job. You let the contractor go. But now comes time for your evaluation, end of year review. And you did not meet some of your goals and objectives. And you say, well, the contractor did not do it. The boss is not going to say, oh, well, never mind then, we'll still give you a raise. They're going to say, well, in that case, you're responsible for the contractor. You are supposed to get it done. So same here, you are responsible for the vendor. They're the contractor. You are supposed to get it done. And by the way, don't try to boil the ocean. Do not try to turn all EQMS components on at the same time. I really recommend that you phase EQMS implementation just to make sure that you are successful. If you try to do too much, you're less likely to succeed. Now, because you're sharing so much with a vendor, you really need to have very strong agreements and vendor management best practices. And I have and regularly scheduled communication. I have an example of how a vendor agreements can go wrong. And a long time ago, I had a flat roof. My previous house, I had a flat roof. And what happened is the roof was guaranteed for life. Unfortunately, because it was flat, we had a storm that completely flooded my roof. And of course, the water was coming through, ruined your floors, all that good stuff. So I called the person who, put the roof on, and I spoke to his wife, and I said, my roof, is not working. You need to come and fix it. And she says, well, we can't do that. And I said, well, but it has lifetime warranty. And she said, yeah, but my husband died. And of course, at this point, I had to ask her, so is it lifetime for the roof, or is it your husband's lifetime? And she said, it was my husband's lifetime. It's very, very easy to have misunderstanding and miscommunication in agreements. So make sure you have regularly scheduled communication, and make sure that you're able to have agreements that can be enhanced as time goes on. And then, of course, we have the vendor subcontractors, like we said, the cloud provider, because the SaaS vendor typically hosts the EQMS on someone else's cloud. Now, in order to do that, they would typically hire a cloud broker, and the cloud broker would then hire the data centers. So they have to be managing the subcontractors, and part of the thing you want to do as part of the vendor audit is to check or to verify the processes for managing their vendors. And you really need to know who's doing what where, and who's doing this, who's doing that. And you make a list of these people, you make a list of what these people are doing, and then you make sure that that your vendor, which is your EQMS vendor, is managing these people correctly. And my question is, it's the middle of the night and you wake up, do you know where your data is? Where is your data? Is it supposed to be there? And what I mean by that is, for example, if you have GDPR requirements and your data is in the, I don't know, Philippines, is it supposed to be there? And the answer is not. I like to be able to visit my data. So I have a data center that they can go to. And the question is, can you visit your data? Or is your data in a data center that burned down and the data center has not notified you and the issue is found out by the MHRA inspector? By the way, this is a true story. MHRA inspector went to inspect the cloud provider. Of course, they refused, and the inspector found out that basically the cloud had burnt, the data center had burnt down. The sponsor had no idea. But you're responsible for everything. So, and oh, by the way, you need training to deal with everything that you're responsible for. Special considerations for SaaS EQMS versus other EQMS. Make sure that your SaaS EQMS is specific to life sciences. Do not go with a generic EQMS. They do not understand regulations. The other thing is EQMS is for multiple functions, and you have all the other SaaS systems that are single function. And many times your SaaS EQMS needs to be able to integrate all these types of other systems. So make sure that's possible to do. Make a list of the systems that need to be interfaces, have interfaces to the SaaS EQMS. And the other thing about EQMS versus other SaaS systems is, of course, SOPs are very important, and we have the user SOPs, but really you need to have a quality governance committee. And it's not just the user SOPs, it has to also be the governance SOPs. And governance SOPs usually generate policies, or governance committees usually generate policies, and the policies then are detailed more in SOPs, but that's not always the case. So make sure you have this covered. So in conclusion, a SaaS EQMS is actually a very efficient way to implement EQMS. I have absolutely no doubt about this. And your vendor really, really helps you a lot. It still needs full validation, and you are responsible. And that's all I have. We have now reached the Q&A section, and I was wondering if we have any questions here.
All right. Thank you very much, Angela, for this, very, very comprehensive training session. So now let's move to the Q&A session. And now, it's your opportunity to engage directly with Angela. So you can post your questions using the Q&A button. We have already received some of them. So let us start by this one from Ginger. Can you, Angela, talk about the difference in extent of validation, for example, between category 3 versus category 4 and configuration? But very generally speaking, I know it can be a complex issue, but can you explain the difference?
Yeah, so category 3 is a it's something that does not have the three components of plan, actual, and sorry, analysis. So something like a system that I'm thinking of Watchdog, which or anything that's in a fridge that says, okay, this is the temperature. I have an excursion, and the excursion needs to be to generate an alert. So the configuration there would be, you want the temperature to be between this and this, and I am configuring this to tell it what needs to happen if there's an excursion from the temperature that we want. And there is things like security, but something like a category 4, the configuration is much more detailed, and really it's only a matter of detail, but the configuration is much more detailed. For example, you want a document management system. Actually, let's look at the training system. You have all these other training system components. Who gets what? You know, if you're in which department, who is the manager, who do you escalate to? So it's a lot more detail than it would be for a category 4 would be much more detailed than a category 3. I hope this helps.
Yeah, sure. Good. Next question from Attila. Our EQMS has a DocuSign plugin for external signatures. So would that be Part 11 compliant, Angela?
Okay, this is actually a really great and interesting question. DocuSign, I do not know how that is integrated, but DocuSign has a separate DocuSign software that's a Part 11 DocuSign software. That would also need to be validated. So, and DocuSign have validation, you know, they're like any other SaaS provider, they have validation test cases and requirements. I have validated DocuSign multiple times, and the vendor's documentation is just it does not cover everything that you need. But if I do not know if your DocuSign is integrated in the EQMS, I've never seen that. But if you have DocuSign as your electronic signature software, you need to make sure you have the Part 11 module DocuSign, and that you also have it, that you have also validated it. And just to let you know, I recently audited a company who was using DocuSign, but not the Part 11 module, and had not validated it. They've had to redo all their electronic signatures because all their SOPs, anything assigned, needs to be done manually. So make sure you have this right, because you can get a lot of work from a regulatory agency citation.
All right. I hope your answer helps, Attila. Good. Let's continue. Another short question from Nick is, if a vendor's testing addresses our intended use or our requirements, can we not leverage their testing?
Yeah, absolutely you can.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, just because you're leveraging the testing, what they found, for example, there was another SaaS system, and they had this is a very complex system, and they had 100, the vendor had 100, and I can't remember, 40 test cases, and I cut them back to 60 because, like I said, you do not need everything. You only need some of the features. So absolutely, of course, use the vendor documentation. Just make sure it's on your template, and make sure it's correct to your requirements and make sure you're only doing the ones for your requirements, not for everything that the vendor has. And actually, I want to make a little comment in here. What I find is some people do too much, even with regular validation, they do too much. You do not, it needs to be just right. You do not want to be doing too many things. And sometimes the vendor has more stuff than you need. So you need to be, you need to make this decision. You need to be thoughtful. And of course, document everything, because that's what agencies look for, that you're in control. They do not look that everything is right, but they look that you're in control.
All right.
Hope this helped.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Angela. Okay, we have 4 more minutes. Maybe we can cover 1 or 2 more questions, right? So one from Octavia. I am currently reviewing the electronic quality management system software. There is a company who says that they can do the validation by clicking some function in their software. Have you come across something like this? Is it acceptable?
Yeah, not acceptable. Not acceptable. And yeah, there's a lot of confusion about this. And I was talking to FDA about it, and like I said, I'll be publishing an article. You do not, I think they're getting mixed up with verification, which happens, but verification is part of validation. Validation in things like planning, having requirements, making sure it works. Clicking something is not validation. However, there are many SaaS systems that you click something and it generates a slew of results. Typically, this gives you a report on the installation of the system. It says, I have all these calculations, for example, and if I click on this, it will go through all these calculations with test data, and it'll make sure all the calculations are correct. And this is, again, the misunderstanding that validation is IQ. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, good. Okay, and the last question from Benjamin. To which extent can you reuse the validation done by vendor in your own validation?
As much as you can get. Yeah, you just look at what you have and use as much as you can get from the vendor. I mean, absolutely milk it for all it's worth. Just make sure it's appropriate and meets your requirements. And then if it's not meeting your requirements, just write additional test cases. Nobody's perfect, by the way. Anything that you get will need some additional work from you.
Okay, well done. Thank you very much, Angela. Unfortunately, it's time. So this is a 1-hour training. So I want to appreciate everybody for being here, for your participation in the Q&A session. Special thanks to you, Angela, for collaborating in this interesting training. And I hope you find it useful. I hope you find this topic interesting and useful in your work. So we're going to share a very short survey at the end of this training. So please, I would like you to dedicate just 1 minute to answer the question so we get your insights just to improve in our future trainings. And remember that we are going to prepare a recap page, and this recap page will address all the questions, those answered questions, and those questions that remain unanswered. And also we are going to include you the link to the recording and also the slides. Okay, so thank you very much. And I hope to see you in the following training sessions. Goodbye and have a nice day.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.